Have you ever looked at your drawing and thought, I suck at drawing hair. How do people do that? That was me before I stumbled onto this workflow. Before, I always did the same thing: line art, flats, color. But drawing hair in this order gives way for a lot of boring problems with even more boring solutions. Okay, I finished my line art, now to paint the flats. Oh, the corners of the hair are too sharp, so unless you tune the tolerance of the paint bucket tool just right, you get these unfilled corners. That's fine, I'll just do the flats by hand then. 20 minutes later, your hand is cramping. I'm gonna show you what changed me from someone who hated drawing hair for years to being, that's not that bad actually. I'm not saying to stop drawing line art, especially since there's a lot of styles out there where line art is the point, and maybe you'll even like drawing line art. What I'm hinting at is the workflow. All of my problems, and maybe yours, stem from doing the line art first, and then the flats to add color. So what happens if we try flipping this? Flats first, and then line art. What makes this such a big difference? With hair, where there's so many strands, lines can be difficult. It might be hard to define the different sections, or maybe you're more of a painter than a drawer, so using lines to define something as complicated as hair can give you issues because you can't see the true volume of the object. Drawing flats first can help with both of these problems. It can help you systematically divide the hair into digestible sections. It's an easy way to help visualize volume before adding any of the little details. And you don't have to deal with these fiddly things. Okay, you can call this a skill issue. Use the paint bucket tool better, set the tolerance, close gap, increase area scaling, use the ice cream fill tool. Yes, this is true, but I will draw for hours and still be annoyed by the 5 minutes it takes to paint bucket each flat and organize them onto separate layers. So if you're anything like me, here's a workflow that cuts all of that friction out. It works when the hair is in both easy or weird shapes flying in the wind. So I will show you 3 hair examples starting with simple to most difficult, all made with the same workflow. Let's first set up with the rough guidelines we're going to use. I take a rough sketch first, and after the main proportions are done, we can start with the hair. On the face, we can draw a horizontal line about 1/3 of the head from the top of the skull. Make an inverted L to connect it to the top of the ear. This will guide where our hairline is. Everything from this line and up will be covered fully by the hair. The next guideline is for the volume of the hair. Make a line above the head and follow the curved line of the skull. How high you put this line will determine how much volume the hair has. Now, make a point or a line at the top of the head to mark where the hair parts. This is where the front of the hair will originate. Draw a rough shape of the front of the hair using the guidelines you made. The character I'm drawing has bangs and side hairs in the front, so just to make it easier later, I'm separating them into 2 main parts. When dividing the hair, remember that none of the slits between the hair should go higher than that horizontal guideline. And the last guideline is to show the flow of the strands. For this first example, I'm going to make it simple. The strands only being weighed down by gravity. No wind, nothing. Do not make these lines very complicated. The fewer the lines, the better. This is to indicate the length of the hair and overall curves. Like, is the hair straight all the way through? Or does the character have wavy or curly hair? This character I'm drawing has mostly straight hair until the very end where it becomes a little curled. Since these strands are very simple and just hanging down, we can introduce some variety by adding drapery. Some strands hanging or highlighting the curves on the body. Do the line art of the rest of the body. And then fill the area occupied by the body. You can use whatever method to do this. I used a quick mask to pencil in the gaps, select the outside area, invert, and fill. And now we can get to the actual hair. The goal is to simplify all of the strands of the hair into 4 main layers. Make a new layer and use the guidelines to paint the bangs, paying attention to the silhouette. I'm using a hard round brush with no pressure opacity turned on. And we can make another layer underneath for any side hair strands. Make the curves following the guideline for hair volume, following from the top of the head. I'm just using different shades of gray, so it's easier to see the boundaries between the 2 different layers. Now for the back hair. Make another new layer under those two layers, but above the body layers in this layer sandwich. This layer is for the strands of hair overlapping on the top of the body, and used to fill up the space at the back of the head. Follow the flow of the guidelines you made and trace the ends of the hair up to the head. If it looks boring, decrease the size of your brush and try paying attention to the tips of the hair, dividing the strands further or adding thin strands sticking out but still following the main flow of the hair. The last main hair layer is going to be at the very bottom of our layer sandwich. So make a new layer below every other layer so far. This is going to contribute to hair volume, filling in any gaps in the back of the hair and used to fill out the silhouette. Here's our layer sandwich so far. With our fills done, we can start rendering parts of the body. I usually start with the face and skin since they're one of the most important parts, and then determine the light source from that and then follow it for other parts of the clothing. Here, the light source is directly above. Back to the hair, we can start with the bangs. Alpha lock the main layer you're working on, fill it with the hair color, and with a soft brush, we can color pick the skin and lightly brush over the parts of hair close to the skin to make the hair look a little translucent. When adding more detail, make a new layer over top of the main layer and clip it down. We can now define the strands. I'm using a pressure opacity sensitive brush, specifically the default round mixing brush from Clip Studio Paint. To add more strands and draw the hair outline, I'm making another new layer on top of everything. I labeled the layer purple to make it easier for you to see. Start drawing from the bottom edges following the curves of your initial hair strands and lead it up to the hair parting at the top of the head. Now for the stripe highlight. Draw a horizontal stripe following the curve of the hair, and then decrease your brush size to divide the stripe into little pieces. To make the highlight glow, make a new layer and use a soft brush. You can try different layer modes like overlay and add glow to get different effects. For the main highlight made from the light coming from above the character, I make a layer clips to that main layer and color it in. Follow the same basic steps for any side hair if there is any. The long hair strands will follow a similar workflow. Add any gradients to the hair with a soft brush. Then, when dividing the strands, start from the bottom of the hair, following the curves up to the origin at the top of the head. Make sure the lines dividing the strands are different thicknesses to introduce variation into the hair. And if you see any overlaps, you can thicken the lines to make some shadows between the strands. Make a layer clipped down for the main highlights, and if there are any boring areas or areas where you feel like it looks a little sparse, you can use a thin brush size to add more strands. The hair at the back is going to be rendered a little more simply and with less detail than the front. This time, fill it with a lighter shade of the hair color you're mainly using, and then use your pressure-sensitive brush. Make your brush size as thick as you want the hair sections to be. We're still tracing the curves of the hair up and dividing the hair, but this time with a much bigger brush. You can use a blending brush to get a smooth gradient leading up. I use the default Painterly blender. Continue dividing the hair into strands and adding more thin strands. For the parts of the hair overlapping in front of the body, we can add a layer below and make the shadows for the hair. I added a little bit of a dark outline to different places in the hair that I thought needed a little more contrast, but otherwise this is a pretty simple composition, especially with the static pose. So let's add some movement by adding a little wind. We can keep the front pieces, the bangs, and side hair since they're going to stay the same. The layer organization is exactly the same as the first example. The only difference is the way the back hair is drawn. Instead of just gravity pulling the hair up and down, we're going to use the excuse of wind to mold the hair to whatever flowing shapes we want. Let's say I wanted the overall composition to be in a diagonal motion, leading from the edges of the page to the face. So I make some guidelines for where I want the main flow of the hair to go. It doesn't really matter that wind doesn't work that way, as long as the curls or waves from where the hair is pushed are in the same general direction and they all lead to the top part of the head, it'll still look cohesive. In this way, we're using hair as a compositional element, lines, to direct the audience's gaze. For the coloring, I did mainly the same thing, but in a little bit of a different order, making the highlights from the overhead lights first before the hair divisions or gradients. Because I feel like when shapes are more complicated than a simple sphere, it's easier to use highlights to emphasize the form first before adding the lines. Start from the tips of the hair and again, lead them up. If you zoom out and something looks like it's missing, add more thin strands. Instead of using a soft brush for the gradients, we can use a hard brush and a blending brush for more control. Onto the back hair, I started with a light color and then used the default round mixing brush to section them out before adding the thin lines. Add a shadow below the hair layer and add more strands, darkening some of the outlines again if certain parts don't stand out enough. The result is movement in a painting, even if the pose is very still. But what if we want even more movement? So we've done draping, wind, what's next? If the background is so plain that you want to fill that empty space, obscure that empty background so that most of the focus is on the person, you can use that hair to fill that space. Because we are going to draw many more strands, we don't need that front hair strand covering the body to create the illusion of depth. So we can move one of the hair layers down below the body layers and add one more layer for a total of 5 main hair layers. This is basically wind 2.0. Instead of one strong force with one clear direction that the wind is pushing the hair, the goal is more about managing the negative space around the hair so that there isn't too much of an imbalance between the strands as they're spread out. Imagining the strands as thick ribbons makes it easier, and we want variance, so don't forget to add little strands beside those big strands too. I still wanted a leading line towards the face, so I made a few lines lead from the canvas edge to the face, and for the back layer, just make sure you're adding strands to even out the negative space if there's some uneven holes between the hair. For the coloring, this composition has many more divided strands, so we can keep the strands on the outer and further edges less detailed on purpose, since we don't want to overwhelm the viewer. I'm sure you've had enough of me repeating the same thing over and over again, so same process as the previous examples for coloring and same brushes. The only thing left to add is you can try darkening some areas with an overlay layer and adding more strands following the flow of the original strands. It looks a little complicated, but being able to fill a background is pretty useful. Which type of hair do you like to draw? Though these examples differ a little bit in complexity, I'm not going to say that one is better than the other. They just all have different uses. For example, I could see this on the cover of a light novel with an absurdly long name, while this one reminds me of visual novel sprites. If you look at a lot of anime-style paintings, especially pinups, you'll notice many of these with long hair fall into one of these 3 examples: draping, wind, or wind 2.0. They look different, but all have the same workflow. This is the easiest way I found to draw anime-style hair after a lot of experimenting, so maybe it'll work for you. I know the layer count might scare you. Please don't be fooled. I feel like this is the easiest way to draw anime-style hair. I think thinking about layer organization in more of a broad sense rather than trying to decipher what layer 53 does in my painting will probably help you more. But thanks for watching. Okay, see ya!